artists began to go through the city. We have several here that we can talk about. One from Kyoto, a man by the name of Nishimura Goun, who was a very traditional painter. He was part of a group of younger Japanese artists operating in what was called the school of Nihonga painting. That means literally Japanese painting. But it was a group of artists who attempted to give an international vocabulary to traditional Japanese themes. Now, the scroll that we see, sequences of different sites of the disaster, was produced in 1925. So this is several years hence. And we presume, based on sketches that he made, it's unlikely that he was there to see the swirling flames. So he's probably basing some of his paintings on reports. But going through the images carefully, he is using visual tropes, ideas that come from scrolls that were painted 800 years before. The fires at castles during war periods are exactly how he describes fires swirling in the new city of Tokyo after the earthquake. And there's a strange classical gentleness to these images. The painting allows you to step back and reflect. Photography is raw. And I think that's the contribution of Nishimura Goun. But it's interesting how we try to memorialize catastrophe in different ways. And these medium give you a little distance. Photography does not.
And as far as you know, that's the only scroll with this disaster theme, or was there?
To the best of my knowledge, it's the only one.
Yeah.
And this is one of a kind. Freer Gallery of Art acquired this in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. And probably no one really knew exactly what it was about. These really are uses of quotations or styles from much earlier painting applied to a current disaster.
But then you have the modern
Right.
telephone poles,
Right.
and electricity.
For those like me fixated on technique,
Mm-hmm.
the style is very soft. The kinds of pigments used is light
Romantic.
and almost romantic, exactly. And the figures themselves are, in a disaster like this, it's hard to say charming, but they are a little bit doll-like.
Yeah, they don't look like they're suffering so much.
Exactly.
Convey
Exactly.
that. But what's
Right.
interesting as you scroll through the scroll is that you notice the presence of the military, the supplies coming in, ships, so it sort of fills out the story that you're not seeing so much in those particular
Right.
Right. disaster photos.
Right.
Right.
Remember, photography was still very limited. That you had to set up shots, and things were not as they were in the 1860s. But still, in 1923, the quick snapshot and move on and catching action, stop action was not possible. So the painter had the obligation to do that,
And
to imagine.
it's also a narrative. I mean,
It is
this
a
story,
narrative.
whereas the photos are.
It's a narrative of disaster, it's a narrative of aid coming in,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a narrative of getting back on their feet.
Right.
You know, Jim, when I look at something like this scroll, in a way it prettifies, makes pretty what was a horrendous, terrible event. There's a way of, it desanitizes almost. I mean, it's very beautiful, but it raises interesting questions on how we see. Because just looking at the scroll, and in a way it softens the horror and the enormity
Right.
of what took place at that time.
What strikes me about this is it is currently in a horizontal scroll format, which is a very traditional form of presenting East Asian painting and telling stories. You move through the scroll, and it's almost as if you're a film producer. The idea of a scene in a scroll is to be roughly shoulder width. So if you're there on the tatami and you're scrolling through, and you have your own little theater, and the good artist, the talented artist, will know how to move from one scene to another. When I look at this particular scroll, I think it may have originally been produced as a series of album leaves. and later put into a scroll format, because there's no natural flow between the images. It's scene 1, a cell, scene 2, a cell, and scene 3. There may be some chronological sequence here, but the paintings don't necessarily flow naturally one to another. You're looking at individual groups. So the style of painting, the way flames are rendered, people swirling in these windstorms that were produced by the fire, that's all very dependent on much earlier ways of painting. But the sequencing, it strikes me as a little odd, a little choppy.